On the 4th of March 2026, the ground beneath Sicily began to shake. Not violently, not at first, just a low, persistent tremor that registered on instruments buried deep inside the rock. Hours later, it happened again. This time, stronger, a magnitude 4.5 earthquake, centered on the southwestern flank of Europe's largest active volcano. And then, at 12:12 Universal Time, Mount Etna answered. The Bocca Nuova summit crater, one of 4 gaping mouths at the volcano's peak, exploded without warning. A single impulsive blast that punched a column of ash and gas 1.5 kilometers straight into the sky. It was a message, a geological statement of intent written in pulverized rock and sulfur. An ancient power reminding the modern world that it operates on a timeline of its own. A timeline that seems to be accelerating. This was not a random event. It was the latest in a series of escalations that has volcanologists at Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, the INGV, working around the clock. They are watching a mountain that is not just erupting, but fundamentally changing its behavior. What would you do if you lived at the foot of this volcano? Let me know in the comments below. An enormous number of people find these stories fascinating, but a huge portion of you forget to subscribe. If you believe understanding the forces that are actively reshaping our planet is important, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. It is genuinely the only way to guarantee you won't miss what happens next. It's an emergency alert for our planet. Subscribe now so you stay informed. Let's begin. This mountain is waking up in a new, more dangerous way. The March 2026 explosion was just a punctuation mark at the end of a terrifying chapter that began the year before. On June 2nd, 2025, a violent eruption from the southeast crater did something that sends a chill down the spine of every scientist who studies Etna. It triggered a pyroclastic flow. This is not lava. It is not something you can outrun. It is a superheated avalanche of gas, ash, and rock fragments, boiling at hundreds of degrees Celsius, moving at highway speeds. A turbulent, ground-hugging cloud of incandescent death. This one surged down into the Valle del Bove, a massive caldera that normally acts as a natural catch basin. Tourists who were on the high-altitude slopes that morning did not walk away. They ran. Video from that day shows a terrifying gray monster consuming the landscape, a stark visualization of the volcano's deadliest capability. It was a close call. A warning shot. The mountain was not finished. On Christmas Eve of 2025, as a gesture of profound geological indifference to the human world, another eruption began. This time, lava poured from the southeast crater not just into the valley, but down the flank of the mountain itself. Not just a little. It flowed continuously, a river of molten rock descending to an altitude of just 1,360 meters above sea level. This was dangerously low. Low enough to trigger alarm bells not in the scientific observatories, but in the offices of the Civil Protection Department. The people who manage evacuations. The people who decide when a threat has become existential. Then, on New Year's Day 2026, just 1 week later, the volcano opened a new wound. A fresh eruptive fissure tore open inside the Valle del Bove, at the foot of an ancient, extinct crater named Simone. It was at an even lower altitude, around 2,000 meters. Fresh rivers of incandescent lava began pouring out, flooding the valley floor. It was a relentless series of events. A pyroclastic surge. A dangerously low-altitude lava flow. A brand new fissure opening, where one hadn't been seen in modern memory. A pattern was emerging. A pattern of escalation. A pattern of unpredictability. It's a sequence of events that has experts and local authorities genuinely concerned. The question becomes, are the current safety measures enough? Or is this a regional disaster that's simply waiting for its moment? I'm curious what you think. Join the discussion in the comments. The mountain was no longer just putting on a spectacular show for tourists and scientists. It was actively threatening the inhabited zones. The result was a set of new rules for 2026, the strictest in memory. Authorities implemented a blanket 200-meter exclusion zone from any active lava. Unguided excursions to the high-altitude areas were banned entirely. The College of Volcanological Guides of Sicily, the men and women who know this mountain better than anyone, who read its moods and guide people on its slopes for a living, took an unprecedented step. They went on strike. The first time in decades. It was a vote of no confidence. A statement that the mountain they knew had become a different, more volatile beast. That the risks had outpaced the protocols. They understood something that the rest of the world was only beginning to grasp. Mount Etna was entering a new and violent chapter. And what happened in 2025 and 2026 was not an anomaly. It was a return to form. To understand what Etna is becoming, you have to understand what it once was. You have to go back to a time before seismometers and gas sensors. Before UNESCO World Heritage Sites. You have to go back to March 11th, 1669. On that day, a fissure over 12 kilometers long ripped open on the southern flank of the volcano, starting high on the mountain and stretching down almost to the town of Nicolosi. But this was not a slow leak. It was a hemorrhaging of the planet's interior. From this gash, the Earth expelled a staggering 830 million cubic meters of lava. That number is so large, it's almost meaningless. To put that in terms you can visualize, it is enough rock to build the Great Pyramid of Giza more than 300 times over. For 4 months, the lava flowed without stopping. It was not a gentle meandering stream. It was a slow-motion catastrophe, a creeping wall of incandescent rock hundreds of feet wide and dozens of feet high. It swallowed farmland. It consumed vineyards and orchards. It erased entire villages. At least 10 towns and villages on the slopes of Etna simply ceased to exist, buried forever beneath a cooling black carapace of basalt. People fled with what they could carry, watching from a distance as their homes, their churches, and their entire history were entombed. The flow advanced relentlessly toward Catania, the major port city at the foot of the volcano. Catania was a fortified city. In 1669, that meant something. It had massive stone walls, built for war, not for geology. And for a time, they held. The lava, thick and viscous, piled up against the city's western fortifications, diverting the main flow southwards. A small group of men from Catania, led by a man named Diego de Papalardo, made a desperate attempt at what might be the world's first large-scale lava diversion. They took pickaxes and iron rods, covered themselves in wet animal hides against the searing heat, and tried to hack a new channel in the side of the main flow, hoping to divert it away from their city. They were partially successful until the new flow they created began threatening the nearby town of Patern. The enraged citizens of Patern drove them away, and the original flow resumed its course. The diverted lava eventually reached the coastline, pouring over the cliffs and into the Ionian Sea. The collision of molten rock and cold salt water created an explosive spectacle of steam and shattered rock. The flow pushed the coastline outwards, filling Catania's harbor, ruining its port, and creating new land where there had once been ocean. The 1669 eruption was the most destructive in Etna's well-documented history. It was a demonstration of the volcano's true capacity, not for spectacle, but for annihilation. And it was not a singular event. History is littered with these moments. In 1928, a new eruption began on the volcano's eastern flank. The lava flowed directly towards the town of Mascali. The evacuation was orderly. The destruction was total. Over the course of a few days, the lava consumed the entire town. Photos from the time show the church steeple, the last structure standing, surrounded by a sea of black rock before it too was torn down and swallowed. The town was later rebuilt higher up the slope by Mussolini's fascist government, on a rigid grid iron plan, a monument to a contest between human order and geological chaos. A contest that humanity rarely wins. In 1923, an eruption threatened Lingua Glossa on the northern slopes. The lava stopped just outside the town, an event the locals attributed to a miracle, a procession honoring their patron, St. Giles. These aren't just stories. They are data points. They are a record, written in stone and memory, of what this volcano is capable of when it decides to act. It's a history that's been written and rewritten in lava. If you feel this is a story your friends and family need to see, an important warning about the power of nature, hit the like button and share this video. Awareness is the first step in preparing for what's coming. And yet, despite this history, despite the clear and present danger written across the entire landscape, over 1 million people live on the slopes of Mount Etna. Right now, in the shadow of the same volcano that buried Mascali and nearly took Catania. Why? Why build a life on the side of Europe's most active, most dangerous volcano? The answer is the mountain itself. The same volcanic processes that create destruction also create life. Volcanic ash, over time, weathers into some of the most fertile soil on the planet. The slopes of Etna are a patchwork of green, a vibrant agricultural powerhouse in the middle of the Mediterranean. The soil is rich in minerals, producing world-famous blood oranges, pistachios, apples, and cherries. And, above all, wine. The vineyards of Etna are unique. Old vines, some over a century old, dig their roots deep into the black, nutrient-rich volcanic soil, producing wines from native grapes like Nerello Mascalesi and Caricante that taste of the place they were grown. They taste of the volcano. The high altitude, the dramatic temperature shifts between day and night, and the mineral-rich earth create a terroir that is impossible to replicate anywhere else. This is not just farming. It is a multi-generational pact with a dangerous landlord. A pact that accepts the risk in exchange for the reward. Dr. Boris Behenke, a senior volcanologist at the Ingves Etna Observatory who has dedicated his life to studying the mountain, puts it perfectly. He calls Etna a volcanic playground for scientists, but he follows that with a crucial warning. The destructive and deadly events happen every now and then, he says, but the benefits are there all the time. That is the central paradox of Etna. The soil provides a living. The mountain provides the threat. The people who live there are not ignorant of the danger. They are intimate with it. They see the ash clouds. They feel the tremors. They sweep the black volcanic sand, called lapilli, from their balconies and rooftops after every major eruption. For them, the volcano is not an abstract threat. It is a neighbor. A powerful, generous, and terrifyingly moody neighbor. They have learned to live with a constant, low-level hum of anxiety, a trade-off for the prosperity the mountain provides, a tax on survival. But the mountain has been sending warnings for a very long time, long before science could even begin to comprehend it. Around the year 434 BC, one of the most brilliant and eccentric minds of the ancient Greek world stood on the rim of Etna's summit crater. His name was Empedocles. He was a philosopher, a poet, a physician, and a politician from the Sicilian city of Akragas. He believed that all matter was composed of 4 essential elements: earth, air, fire, and water. He also believed he was a god. To prove his divinity to his followers, to demonstrate his final transformation from mortal to immortal, a legend persists that Empedocles took a final, dramatic leap. He threw himself into the churning, incandescent heart of Mount Etna's active crater. The idea was that the fire would consume his mortal body, allowing his divine essence to ascend. He would not die. He would become one with the elements. But the volcano, a primordial force of nature, had a different opinion. According to the story, sometime after Empedocles' final act, the volcano had a particularly violent burp, and in that explosive eruption, it spat something out. Something that landed on the crater rim for his horrified followers to find. His signature bronze sandal. The mountain rejected his claim to divinity. It refused his sacrifice. It kept the philosopher, but it returned his shoe, a final geological insult, a smoldering, metallic rebuttal to human arrogance. The story is almost certainly a myth, but like all powerful myths, it contains a deeper truth. It is a cautionary tale, 2.5 millennia old, about the relationship between humanity and this specific volcano. A warning against hubris. A warning that this mountain has a character of its own, and it does not suffer fools. It's an ancient warning we seem to have forgotten. This story is just one layer of the deep history we're unpacking. If you're finding this journey as gripping as we are, and you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time to fix that. It is the single most important thing you can do to help us continue making these deep dives into the stories that matter. Today, the people trying to understand Etna are not philosophers. They are scientists, and their tools are far more sophisticated than bronze sandals. At the base of the volcano, in the city of Catania, sits the Osservatorio Etneo, the Etna Observatory. It is the specialized branch of Italy's National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology, or INGV, and it is one of the most advanced volcano monitoring centers on the planet. This is the modern front line in the ancient conversation between humanity and the mountain. Inside, teams of volcanologists, led by researchers like Dr. Bahinki and overseen by INGV President Fabio Florendo, work in shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their mission is to read the mountain's vital signs, to listen to its faintest whispers, to translate the language of geology into warnings that can save lives. The entire volcano is wired like a patient in intensive care. A dense network of GPS stations measures millimeter-scale swelling of the ground, an indication that magma is rising from below. Tilt meters detect subtle changes in the slope of the mountain. Gravimeters measure shifts in the local gravity field, another sign of magma on the move. Seismometers, scattered across the flanks and summit, listen for the characteristic tremors and earthquakes that signal magma breaking through rock as it ascends towards the surface. Cameras, both visible and thermal, watch the summit craters constantly, looking for changes in heat and activity. And a network of gas sensors sniffs the air for changes in the composition of volcanic gases. An increase in sulfur dioxide, or SO2, is a classic and reliable precursor to an eruption. During its more active phases, Etna can pump out between 6,000 and 8,000 tons of SO2 every single day. The observatory tracks these emissions in real time. All of this data flows into the control room in Catania, a scene of quiet, focused intensity. Screens display seismographs, gas readings, thermal images, and GPS maps. The scientists are not just collecting data. They are engaged in a high-stakes act of interpretation, looking for patterns, for deviations from the baseline, for any signal that the volcano's state of equilibrium is about to shift. From this room, they issue alerts to Italy's Civil Protection Department, the agency that makes the final call on restricting access or, in a worst-case scenario, ordering evacuations. This scientific endeavor has made Etna one of the most understood volcanoes on Earth. But that understanding has its limits, because the mountain itself is not a single, simple thing. It is a complex, evolving system. And it is a shapeshifter. Most people think of a volcano as having one single crater at the top. Etna has four. Four distinct, highly active, and constantly competing summit craters. The Vorigine, the Bocca Nuova, the Southeast Crater, and the Northeast Crater. They are not all active at once. Sometimes one will be the focus of activity for months or years, building itself up with layers of lava and ash, while the others remain quiet. Then, the plumbing system shifts deep underground, and a different crater roars to life. This constant activity means the mountain is literally building itself in real time. Its height is not fixed. It changes. For years, the southeast crater was the highest point on the volcano, reaching an elevation of 3,357 meters in 2021. But then, following a series of powerful eruptions in the summer of 2024, the Voragine crater grew dramatically. New measurements confirmed it had surpassed the southeast crater, pushing the volcano's total elevation to a staggering 3,403 meters. That's over 11,165 feet, a mountain that is actively growing right before our eyes. It covers a massive area of 1,190 square kilometers, with a base circumference of 140 miles. It is, by a huge margin, the tallest and most voluminous active volcano in Europe, roughly 2.5 times the height of its more infamous cousin, Mount Vesuvius, and it all sits on top of a major geological fault line, a place where two continents are at war. The African plate is slowly, relentlessly crashing into the Eurasian plate. As it does, a piece of the African plate is being forced downwards or subducted into the Earth's mantle. This complex process creates fractures and weaknesses in the crust, extensional faults that allow magma from the deep mantle to find a pathway to the surface. Etna is not just a volcano, it is a symptom. A wound in the Earth's crust that has been open for at least 500,000 years. From its earliest submarine beginnings to the massive stratovolcano that stands today. It is a direct and violent consequence of continental scale forces that humanity has absolutely no power to stop. We can only watch, and what the scientists are seeing now is deeply unsettling. The recent pattern of behavior, the low-altitude flows, the new fissures, the impulsive explosions, suggests that the underground plumbing system is being reconfigured, that new pathways for magma are opening up. The very systems designed to provide warning are instead documenting a shift into a new, more dangerous phase. This brings us back to the volcanological guides, the people who make their living on the mountain. Their 2026 strike was not about money. It was about physics. It was a declaration that their institutional knowledge, passed down through generations of mountain guides, was no longer sufficient to guarantee safety. The mountain's behavior had become too erratic. The new rules, like the 200-meter exclusion zone, are not a strategy for control. They are an admission of its loss. It is the authorities drawing a line on a map and implicitly stating, "Beyond this point, we can no longer protect you. You are on your own." When the people who know the mountain best refuse to approach it, it is a signal more potent than any seismograph. It is a human alarm bell. The tools are better than ever. The science is more advanced. We can measure the mountain's breath and feel its pulse, and all that data is telling us the same thing. The crisis is not over. It is evolving. I know, I'm mentioning it again. But it's incredibly important. We put hundreds of hours of research, writing, and editing into a story like this, and a single click on the subscribe button from you is what makes it possible for us to continue. It is not an exaggeration. It's the fuel for this entire channel. Please, if you have not done so, take 1 second to do it now. It means the world. The situation on Mount Etna is not static. It is a moving target. The March 4th, 2026 explosion from the Bocca Nuova crater served as a stark reminder of how quickly the situation can change. One moment, the volcano is in a state of monitored but relatively stable unrest. The next, a violent, unpredicted explosion sends a shockwave through the scientific community. The fact that it followed a significant earthquake on the volcano's flank suggests a direct link between seismic stress and surface-level eruptions. A relationship that makes long-term prediction even more difficult. To put it simply, the ground is being rearranged, and each shift can trigger another blast. This is why Etna was designated a decade volcano by the United Nations. It is one of just 16 volcanoes worldwide identified for special, intensive study because they combine a history of large, destructive eruptions with extreme proximity to dense human populations. The designation is an official recognition of the inherent elevated threat. Etna is not just a geological curiosity. It's a humanitarian crisis waiting to happen. The monitoring at the Osservatorio Etneo provides a few days, or sometimes just a few hours, of warning for a major eruption. It's enough time to stop tours, close airports to ash clouds, and perhaps in a dire scenario. Begin an evacuation. It is not enough time to stop the event itself. The science of volcanology is not about prediction in the way we predict the weather. It is about forecasting probabilities. It is about recognizing precursors. It's about reading the signs that the immense pressures building miles beneath the surface are reaching a critical point. The problem is that Etna is rewriting its own rulebook. The low-altitude fissure at Mid-Simone in January 2026 was a perfect example. It opened in an area within the Valle del Bove that had been quiet for a long time. It demonstrated that magma could find new, unexpected pathways to the surface, bypassing the main summit conduits that are most heavily monitored. This is the scenario that keeps volcanologists awake at night. An eruption that doesn't start at the summit, but on the heavily populated lower flanks of the volcano. A repeat of 1669. The modern world has never had to face a 1669 scale eruption from Etna. Our society is infinitely more complex and more fragile than it was in the 17th century. We have power grids, communication networks, international airports, and a globally interconnected economy. An eruption on that scale today would not just be a Sicilian tragedy. It would be a European crisis. An ash cloud from a major Etna eruption could shut down air traffic across the Mediterranean for weeks. The economic disruption would be immense. The agricultural heartland on its slopes would be devastated. The future of Etna is therefore a story of competing forces. On one side, you have the relentless, unstoppable power of plate tectonics, the engine that has driven this volcano for 500,000 years and will continue to drive it for millennia to come. On the other side, you have human ingenuity, the scientific monitoring, the civil defense planning, the resilience of a population that has learned to live with the beast in its backyard. Right now, the balance seems to be tilting. The volcano's activity is becoming more frequent, more explosive, and less predictable. The warning signs are all there. The increased seismicity, the new fissures, the impulsive explosions, the unprecedented strike by the guides. The mountain is speaking a language of violence and instability. We have built incredible tools to listen to it. The work happening at the Ingv is nothing short of heroic, a testament to human curiosity and our drive to understand the world around us. But that understanding does not grant us control. It only gives us a front row seat to a power that dwarfs our own ambitions. The work is not about preventing the disaster. It's about documenting its arrival with exquisite precision. The story of Mount Etna is no longer about its past. It is about its immediate future. The questions are stark. Did the events of 2025 and 2026 represent a peak? Or were they just the prelude to something much larger? Is the current monitoring system capable of providing enough warning for a flank eruption that could threaten towns like Nicolosi or Lingua Glossa directly? Or have 1 million people simply placed a bet on a geological monster that is finally preparing to call their bluff? The mountain is active right now. Its summit craters glow in the dark. Gas rises from its fumaroles. Magma is moving deep beneath the ground. The story is not over. It is happening.